All right, welcome back for our third deep dive. And this time we're taking a look at John Adams, America's second president.
Mm.
He's the guy who had to follow George Washington.
Oh, yeah. Tough act to follow.
So tough.
Yeah. How do you even begin to step into those shoes?
Well, lucky for us, we've got some help from Dr. Jero Almeida, who I think has a real knack for spotting those sort of like unexpected connections and insights in data.
Yeah, I was looking over his bio. I mean, senior business process manager at KID, PhD in information systems, even a book, Raising Tomorrow's Leaders, the consultant's mindset.
So clearly someone who knows a thing or two about leadership and, the demands of high stakes situations.
Absolutely.
And his analysis of Adams' speech is just full of surprises. Like, just to kick things off, did you know that Adams managed to squeeze 727 words into a single sentence in his address?
727 words? Are you serious?
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, that's like a whole, chapter of a book or something.
Like a short story.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
try to imagine any modern president trying to pull that off today.
Oh my gosh, no.
It's all about sound bites and tweets, like keeping it short and punchy.
Right.
But Adams was operating in a completely different world, right?
Absolutely. A world where long-winded was kind of a sign of intelligence, I guess.
They're more academic, right?
Yeah.
More philosophical, maybe.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just the sentence length that was striking. Dr. Almeida's analysis also found that over 16% of the sentences in Adams's address are actually questions.
Really?
Yeah, and they're mostly clustered right in the middle of the speech.
So it's not just long, it's like an interrogation.
Yeah. What do you make of that?
I don't know, it's interesting because you might expect a bit more of that, rah, let's do this energy in an inaugural address, right?
Yeah.
Especially for a new nation facing so many challenges, but maybe this approach reflects that kind of, the anxieties of the time.
Oh, totally. And remember, the nation was still, really grappling with its newfound independence, right? Like they just, won the revolution.
So thrown off the shackles of the British monarchy, and now they're trying to figure out what this new experiment, this more perfect union, actually means in practice.
Yeah, there had to be so much uncertainty about the future.
Absolutely. And speaking of anxieties, Dr. Almeida found something really interesting about the sentiment in Adams's speech.
Okay, tell me.
So apparently the most positive sentiment in the entire address is tied to Adams praising George Washington's accomplishments.
Oh, really? So it's like he's trying to reassure everyone that things will be okay, even though Washington's gone.
Right, exactly. It's like, hey, don't worry, we're in good hands, even though, the big guy has stepped down.
It does make you wonder if there was a bit of, I've got big shoes to fill anxiety going on there.
Oh, I bet. So, Washington was a legend, right? He led them to victory in the Revolution.
Larger than life figure, for sure.
Yeah, so following in those footsteps must have felt like an incredible responsibility.
Absolutely. And it speaks to that immense pressure and expectations that come with the presidency, even in those early days.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. So we've got long sentences, lots of questions, a healthy dose of admiration for the previous president.
What else?
What else did Dr. Almeida uncover? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. Adams expresses this deep concern about foreign nations influencing American elections.
Oh, wow.
He even used the phrase, foreign nations who govern us.
That sounds familiar.
Right, doesn't it?
It's kind of eerie how some anxieties just transcend time.
Yeah, today we worry about election interference through social media and hacking.
Right.
Back then it was more about, covert influence and alliances. But the underlying fear that outside forces are somehow manipulating American democracy. That's a theme that echoes throughout our history.
It's fascinating how those concerns persist even as the methods of interference evolve.
Exactly. It shows you how deeply ingrained that fear of losing control of our own destiny is in the American psyche.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of themes that resonate, Adams also stressed the importance of national unity. He specifically warned against divisions based on geography, warning against northern or southern, eastern or western factions.
Yeah, that's such a persistent challenge for American presidents, right?
Yeah.
How do you unite a diverse nation with often competing interests?
How do you bring people together when they literally come from different backgrounds, different beliefs, different visions for the future?
Exactly.
It's a question that feels just as relevant today as it was back then.
I agree, especially in an era marked by, such heightened political polarization.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we've covered sentence length rhetorical questions, anxieties about foreign influence, calls for national unity. What else jumped out at you from Dr. Almeida's analysis?
Well, one thing that really stood out was how much Adams leaned on the Constitution throughout his speech.
Right. It's like he's saying this document is our guide, our blueprint for building a successful nation.
Exactly. And that emphasis on the Constitution, it continues even in presidential speeches today.
Even though interpretations and applications have obviously evolved, right?
Yeah.
It's incredible to think about how one document written over 200 years ago can still have such a profound impact.
Absolutely. And it's a reminder that the conversation about the Constitution, about the balance of power, about individual rights versus collective responsibilities, that conversation is ongoing.
It's a conversation that we're all a part of.
Absolutely.
Now, it's crucial to remember the context in which Adams delivered this address.
Right.
Right. He was speaking to a very select group, white male landowners.
Right. That's a world away from the diverse electorate that modern presidents must address.
It's a stark reminder of how far we've come in terms of expanding suffrage and democratic participation.
It underscores the challenges facing modern presidents as they strive to connect with a vastly more diverse and complex society.
Yeah, it's not just about crafting eloquent words anymore. It's about understanding and representing the hopes and fears and aspirations of a nation that looks very different from the one John Adams addressed over 200 years ago.
And navigating a media landscape that has been utterly transformed by technology. Can you imagine Adams trying to grapple with social media, 24/7 news cycles, the constant barrage of information we face today?
I think he'd probably just resort to writing one really, really long tweet.
Maybe he would, but in all seriousness, it highlights how dramatically the presidency has evolved since the time of Adams.
Understanding that evolution really helps us appreciate the unique challenges faced by those who hold the office today.
For sure.
So we've got this fascinating glimpse into early American leadership with John Adams' inaugural address. But there's a lot more to the story, right?
Absolutely.
To truly understand Adams's presidency, we need to consider the historical backdrop, the events that shaped his time in office.
Absolutely. We have to think about things like the Northwest Indian War and the First Barbary War.
The Northwest Indian War, which was a decade-long struggle for control of the Northwest Territory.
Right. A conflict that really highlights the ongoing tensions between the expanding United States and Native American tribes.
And then you have the First Barbary War, a naval conflict with the Barbary states of North Africa.
Right. A conflict that demonstrates America's growing presence on the world stage and its willingness to defend its interests abroad.
Both of these conflicts, along with the ongoing debate over the role of the federal government and the lingering threat of foreign influence, really shaped the political landscape of Adams's presidency.
Absolutely. They provide crucial context for understanding the challenges he faced and the decisions he made during his time in office.
So it's easy to look back at these early presidents as figures from like a distant past. But their struggles, their triumphs continue to shape the nation we live in today.
Their words and actions remind us of the enduring principles of American democracy, but also that constant need to adapt and evolve in the face of new challenges.
And on that note, let's take a quick pause before we dive into part 2 of our deep dive. We'll be back in a moment to explore some of the specific words and phrases that make John Adams' inaugural address so fascinating.
Let's take a quick break. Want to equip your child with the skills of top global consultants? Don't let them fall behind. Raising Tomorrow's Leaders, The Consultant's Mindset by Dr. Jero Almeida is your guide to fostering essential skills in your children for their lifelong success. Available now on Amazon.
Welcome back to our deep dive into John Adams' inaugural address.
So we've covered a lot of ground already.
We have.
From, Adams's love of lengthy sentences to his anxieties about foreign interference.
Right.
But let's zoom in on some specific words and phrases that Dr. Almeida highlighted in his analysis.
Okay. Sounds good.
Because sometimes those individual words can be incredibly revealing, right?
Absolutely. It's like examining the brushstrokes of a painting. They can tell you so much about the artist's technique and intention.
Exactly. Well, one phrase that Dr. Almeida flagged as particularly interesting was forms of government.
Okay.
He found that Adams used it multiple times, often when talking about the Constitution and the balance of power in the new republic.
Interesting. So what do you think that tells us?
Well, it suggests that Adams was keenly aware of the fragility of democracy, especially in those early stages.
Yeah, he was literally witnessing the birth of a new form of government.
Right, one that had no real precedent in history.
And remember the Articles of Confederation, the first attempt at a national government, had failed?
Right.
So there was probably a lot of uncertainty about whether this new experiment, this more perfect union, would actually succeed.
Yeah, and that uncertainty probably fueled Adams's focus on the Constitution.
The guiding principle, the blueprint for this unprecedented undertaking.
Exactly. It's as if he's saying, look, we've got this document, this framework for how we're going to govern ourselves. Let's stick to it. Let's make it work.
It's like a rallying cry, a call for unity around this shared set of principles enshrined in the Constitution.
Now, another word that popped up in Dr. Almeida's analysis was intelligence,
Okay.
specifically the phrase intelligence of the people. This one really struck me because it speaks to Adams's faith in the capacity of citizens to participate in a democracy.
Yeah, that's an important point. It suggests that even though the electorate was incredibly limited at the time,
Right.
Adams believed in the power of an informed citizenry.
Yeah, he saw education and critical thinking as essential for the success of this new republic.
Absolutely. He even said at one point, and I'm paraphrasing here, that the people have a right to be heard, that they should engage in public discourse and debate.
Which is fascinating considering the limited avenues for public expression back then.
Right. No social media, no 24-hour news channels. It was a very different media landscape.
But it highlights the enduring importance of civic engagement, right?
For sure.
Of citizens being informed and involved in the political process. It's a core tenet of democracy that resonates even today.
Absolutely. Now, shifting gears a bit, Dr. Almeida also pointed out the recurring theme of national unity in Adams' speech.
Oh, yeah, he repeatedly emphasized the need to avoid divisions based on geography, political parties, or any other factions.
Right, and this is where we see Adams grappling with a challenge that continues to plague American democracy.
What's that?
How to maintain unity amidst diversity.
Right. It's that classic tension between e pluribus unum out of many one.
Exactly. How do you forge a single nation out of a multitude of voices, perspectives, and interests?
It's a question that every president since Adams has had to wrestle with.
Yeah, and it's become even more complex in today's world, where those divisions are amplified by social media and the echo chambers of online discourse.
Absolutely. But Adams' emphasis on unity serves as a timeless reminder that a democracy thrives when its citizens find common ground, when they prioritize the collective good over narrow self-interest.
It's a lesson that's perhaps more relevant now than ever before.
Okay, so before we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
there's one more point I want to touch on. It's a phrase that might seem a bit odd to modern ears, but it got my attention, sacred principle.
Oh, yes. Dr. Almeida mentioned that Adams used this phrase when discussing the rule of law and the importance of upholding the Constitution.
What's so striking about this is the language. He doesn't just say important principle or fundamental principle.
Right.
He elevates it to the realm of the sacred.
It suggests a deep reverence for the founding documents and the ideals they represent. It's almost like he's imbuing them with a moral authority.
And that framing is interesting to consider in the context of today's political climate, where those founding principles are often fiercely debated and even contested.
It raises the question, what do we consider sacred in our modern democracy?
What are the values and principles that we hold as inviolable?
That's a thought-provoking question to ponder, and it leads us nicely into the final part of our deep dive into John Adams's inaugural address.
You know, we've really gone deep on this one.
We have.
You know, the statistical quirks, the emotional undercurrents, those big recurring themes, and we've seen how Adams grappled with issues that are still so relevant today.
Absolutely. Foreign influence, national unity, the role of the Constitution. You know, these are things that we're still talking about today.
But now I want to shift the focus to you, the listener.
Oh,
What did you find most striking about this speech? What insights or questions did it spark for you? Because history isn't just a collection of, dusty sacks and figures. It's an ongoing conversation.
right. It's alive.
It shapes our present and our future.
Absolutely. And John Adams's words, spoken over 200 years ago, they still have the power to challenge us, to make us think differently about the world we live in.
So as you reflect on Adams' words, think about how they inform your perspective on modern political discourse. How has the language of leadership evolved?
Yeah.
How do today's presidents navigate this incredibly complex communication environment?
Right. It's a whole different world.
It is a whole different world. And maybe most importantly, what lessons can we draw from Adams' emphasis on national unity, and especially, in our current era, where it feels like everyone's at each other's throats all the time?
Yeah. How do we balance the need for consensus with the right to dissent, the desire for stability, with the need for progress?
These are questions that go way beyond just a single speech or a single presidency. They really get to the heart of what democracy is all about.
Yeah. What does it mean to be an active and engaged citizen in the 21st century? How do we make sure our voices are heard and that our government truly represents the will of the people?
That's what we hope these deep dives inspire, that sense of curiosity. The willingness to question the passion for lifelong learning.
Like John Adams himself said, let us dare to read, think, speak, and write.
Those words spoken over 200 years ago, man, they're still so powerful. Engage with the world around you, seek out diverse perspectives, and never stop questioning the status quo.
That's the spirit of the deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another fascinating plunge into history data and the ideas that shape our world.